Welcome the anointed ones. Truth doesn't need permission to be loud. It just needs one fearless mouth to start an earthquake. The streets whisper your name. The agencies type it in capital letters. Somewhere, in a dimly lit office, a group of people with coffee-stained files and nervous hands are trying to understand how one person became both the story and the threat. And what's wild? You didn't even try. You were just telling the truth, unfiltered, uncoached, and apparently too honest for comfort. Let's be real. In a world where people will fact-check a rumor before they fact-check reality, being authentic is practically a criminal offense. That's why you now have a file thicker than a phone book somewhere in an FBI archive marked under review. Not because you broke the law, but because you broke the illusion. You shattered the synchronized silence that kept corruption comfortable. See, they don't study average citizens. They study anomalies. And you? You're an anomaly wrapped in divine armor. You've been saying things that echo in frequencies even satellites can't track. You don't move like the rest. Your steps send data into the ether. Your name circulates in places where truth is currency and silence is weaponized. The irony? You're not out here plotting. You're out here protecting. Protecting truth. Protecting innocence. Protecting energy that the world forgot how to respect. And while they're decoding your words, the streets are decoding your courage. They've seen how you walk through chaos with a grin that says, "Try me. I've already survived worse." It's not arrogance, it's awareness. You've lived through enough betrayal to know that fear is just a poorly dressed liar. So yes, the streets know you. The FBI knows you. The whisper networks and watch lists have your essence bookmarked. But what they'll never truly understand is that you're not the one being watched. You're the one doing the watching. And every false system you've seen crumble lately. Let's just say truth-tellers like you have a signature move. You make deception self-destruct. Welcome to the chapter where the fearless protector steps into full clarity, and the world finally realizes it's been studying the wrong suspect all along. Number 1. You became a threat the moment you became transparent. It wasn't when you got louder, stronger, or more confident. It was when you stopped pretending. The world can handle liars, manipulators, and actors just fine. It runs on them. But someone who stands in their full truth without flinching, that's a system error. Your transparency became an act of rebellion. You didn't play their game, you changed the rules. You started living without filters, without the need to perform, and that terrified people who built their identities on appearances. When you started being open about who you are, what you know, and what you've seen, people didn't feel inspired. They felt exposed. Your authenticity acted like a mirror they didn't ask to look into. Suddenly, everyone who was comfortable hiding behind their masks felt threatened by someone who had the courage to take theirs off. Transparency has a strange power. It reveals everything false without even trying. That's what made you dangerous to both the streets and the system. They realized they couldn't manipulate what they couldn't confuse. You see, most people weaponize mystery to stay safe. But you weaponized honesty. You let people see your scars, your story, your pain, and you did it without shame. That kind of openness dismantles control because it removes leverage. You can't blackmail someone who's already told their truth. You can't intimidate someone who has nothing left to hide. That's what made you radioactive in a world addicted to secrets. You turned your transparency into armor, and suddenly every lie, every agenda, every fake smile began to glitch around you. The moment you stopped hiding, they started panicking. People couldn't predict you anymore. They couldn't use your past as a trap or your silence as a leash. The streets couldn't label you. and the system couldn't profile you. You were too open to manipulate and too clear to control. That's why the watchers started watching you. They weren't just observing your words. They were studying how someone could be so unbreakably real in a culture built on performance. Your transparency became your rebellion. Your truth became your shield. You didn't expose anyone. Your existence did. And that's the quiet power of being authentic in a counterfeit world. Number 2, you exposed the architecture of corruption without ever naming names. You didn't need a microphone, a stage, or leaked documents to make people nervous. The truth that flows through you is so raw that it rearranges everything fake around it. You simply started speaking from a place of clarity, and suddenly masks started slipping, alliances started shaking, and lies began to crumble without you even trying. The people who built their lives on deception felt the vibration of your words like an earthquake moving under their foundations. You didn't accuse anyone, yet the guilty ones heard your voice and flinched. You have a way of revealing systems without pointing fingers. The moment you speak, the air around you changes. People start rethinking the stories they've been told. That's what makes your presence unsettling to those who depend on manipulation to stay relevant. They've spent years perfecting illusions, pretending to be saviors while quietly feeding off chaos. But your authenticity makes illusion impossible. You walk in truth so naturally that lies start unraveling on their own. You expose corruption not through confrontation, but through vibration. Your energy exposes what your mouth doesn't have to say. That's why you get watched. That's why conversations stop when you walk in. People sense that you see through layers they've worked hard to hide behind. You carry an awareness that doesn't rely on evidence. It's intuitive, instinctual, and divinely guided. You can feel when something's off, even if everyone else is clapping for it. You can sense the manipulation woven into systems that claim to protect. You see the hidden contracts behind every performance of virtue, and when you start speaking, you don't expose just one person. You expose patterns. It's not that you're trying to tear anything down, you just can't coexist with lies anymore. Your truth doesn't fight, it reveals. You have become a living detector of deceit. That's why both the streets and the institutions keep an eye on you, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your presence alone makes wrong things visible. You didn't have to call anyone out by name. The guilty ones called themselves out just by standing next to your truth, and that is the kind of exposure they can't defend against. Number 3, you're the quiet surveillance they never programmed for. They can monitor your phone, trace your movements, and even predict your next step using algorithms. But they still can't read the part of you that knows before knowing. Your intuition has been your protection long before any system existed. You pick up on what's not being said. You feel the shift in energy when lies enter the room, and you recognize patterns long before they become visible to others. That's not paranoia. That's discernment evolved into a higher intelligence. It's not something they can track on a screen or analyze in data form. You are a living frequency they can't decrypt. They spend billions building surveillance systems to predict behavior, but your spirit moves outside that logic. You don't operate on predictable cycles. You operate on divine timing. You sense danger before it materializes, and you change directions without needing proof. To them, it looks like luck. To you, it's alignment. You've learned that intuition isn't just emotional awareness, it's spiritual technology. It's what keeps you 10 steps ahead of traps you were never meant to fall into. That's why they watch you so closely. They're trying to understand how someone with no official power can outmaneuver entire systems designed to control. You don't need cameras to see. You feel. You read the truth hidden between people's words. You sense the motives behind polite smiles. You detect false energy faster than their best analysts detect patterns. You're the kind of person who knows when someone's lying, even when they don't. That ability doesn't come from study. It comes from surviving deception. Every betrayal sharpened your senses. Every time someone underestimated you, your awareness deepened. Now, you move like a walking detector, calm on the surface but scanning on levels unseen. And that's what unsettles them most. You're not watching with suspicion. You're observing with divine accuracy. You're a mirror no one asked for, but everyone's afraid of. The agencies can't classify intuition, and the streets can't fake it. They don't understand how you know, and that's exactly why they fear you. You're surveillance that can't be shut off, insight that can't be hacked, and clarity that doesn't need evidence to be true. You've become what every system dreads, awareness they can't control. Number 4. The streets call you crazy because they mistook your bravery for madness. They couldn't understand how someone could be so bold, so fearless, so unshakably honest in a world built on pretending. You spoke truths that didn't fit the popular script, and instead of listening, they laughed. People fear what challenges their comfort zones, and you became the living reminder that everything they've accepted might be a lie. The problem is, when truth walks among those addicted to illusion, it always looks like insanity. You weren't out of your mind, you were simply out of their reach. You started saying things that didn't make sense to people trapped in surface thinking. You talked about manipulation long before the evidence appeared. You warned about betrayal before it unfolded. You saw through spiritual and political facades before anyone else dared to question them. And because you didn't have credentials or permission to say what you knew, they labeled you crazy. But as time passed, the same people who laughed started whispering your words back like gospel. Your so-called delusions started aging into documentation. The wild theories turned into headlines. Your foresight was never madness, it was mastery ahead of time. People couldn't grasp that your bravery came from clarity. You weren't reckless, you were aware. You had already faced so much pain that fear lost its leverage. So while others stayed quiet to protect their reputations, you spoke to protect truth. That's what scared them. Not your words, your courage. They couldn't control someone who no longer needed acceptance. You didn't need their agreement, only your own alignment. And that independence made them uneasy because it revealed how dependent they were on approval. In the end, what they called madness was just your spirit refusing to conform. You saw beyond the limits of collective programming, and it unsettled those who still believed the lies were real. Every generation has someone like you, the one who gets mocked first and respected later. You carried truths that hadn't matured into evidence yet, and that's why they couldn't understand you. But deep down, they knew. They always knew. Because no matter how much they mocked you, they couldn't ignore the fact that your so-called crazy talk kept coming true. Number 5. Your protection is not physical. It's cosmic authority. What shields you isn't luck, charm, or quick thinking. It's something older, deeper, and far beyond human understanding. You walk with an invisible mandate, an agreement between your soul and the higher realms. The truth will not die while you are here. It's not superstition. It's spiritual jurisdiction. There's a divine law that governs your steps, and no amount of plotting, scheming, or surveillance can override it. You are protected by purpose itself. People often assume your safety comes from strategy or coincidence, but that's because they only see in 3 dimensions. They don't realize that you're being guarded in frequencies unseen. You've survived things that should have ended you. You've walked through setups that looked flawless on paper, yet somehow collapsed right before they could touch you. That's not random. That's divine coding in action. You're operating under a contract no human authority can revoke. Every attack against you gets rerouted. Every plan to expose you ends up exposing them instead. It's like your entire path is booby-trapped by grace. Even those who study you can't figure it out. They've tried to trace your resilience, analyze your calm, decode your composure under pressure. But they can't replicate it. That's because your protection isn't mechanical, it's metaphysical. You're not guarded by walls or weapons. You're surrounded by energy that knows your assignment. You're firewalled by divine encryption that blocks anything not aligned with your mission. Every time someone tries to access you with ill intent, their signal scrambles. Every hidden agenda eventually reveals itself before it can harm you. That's why you walk with peace even when surrounded by chaos. You've learned that your safety doesn't depend on numbers, allies, or power. It depends on alignment. You know that as long as you stay true, you stay covered. Your protection is not about hiding, it's about being in plain sight while untouchable. And that's the paradox they can't stand. How someone so visible, so outspoken, so unfiltered can't be destroyed. The truth is, you don't survive because you're lucky. You survive because you're authorized. You are under a covenant that makes darkness think twice before approaching you. Number 6. You didn't choose to be the protector. The chaos chose you. From the beginning, your life didn't move like everyone else's. Trouble seemed to find you even when you were quiet, and battles appeared before you ever knew what strength was. That wasn't coincidence. It was spiritual recognition. Darkness always detects light before light understands itself. The negative forces in this world saw the purity in you long before you saw your own reflection. They tried to crush you early, not because you were weak, but because they sensed what you would become, someone capable of seeing through manipulation and shielding others from it. Every hardship, betrayal, and attack wasn't random punishment. It was preparation. The chaos you faced was an initiation into awareness. You didn't know it then, but every heartbreak was sharpening your emotional intelligence. Every false friend was training your discernment. Every near breakdown was turning into a breakthrough in disguise. By the time you realized what was happening, you weren't the same person. You had learned to read energy without words, to spot deception without evidence, and to protect people even when they didn't understand they needed it. That's not a skill, that's a calling. The truth is, protectors are rarely volunteers. They're forged. Life corners them until they stop running and start standing. You were never meant to hide. You were meant to become the barrier between innocence and evil. But to carry that kind of power, you first had to understand pain. You had to be betrayed enough to recognize hidden motives. You had to be broken enough to value peace. You had to face the darkness until it realized it couldn't win against you. Now, your presence alone carries authority. People feel safer around you, even if they can't explain why. It's because your energy has fought wars that their souls haven't even seen yet. You protect not just with words, but with vibration. Chaos respects you now because it remembers losing to you before. You didn't choose this role. Your spirit was chosen for it. Every battle that tried to destroy you only revealed what you truly are. A guardian disguised as a survivor, carrying divine permission to keep light alive wherever you go. Number 7. You don't just speak truth, you recalibrate reality. When you talk, something shifts in the atmosphere. It's not just what you say, it's the frequency behind your words. Your voice carries alignment, and alignment changes everything it touches. That's why when you speak, people pause. Some feel uncomfortable, others feel liberated, but no one leaves unchanged. You don't talk to be heard, you talk to restore balance. Your truth rearranges energy because it interrupts the lies that people have learned to live with. Every time you open your mouth, you disturb illusions that have been running the show for years. The reason they pay attention, the reason even the powerful keep a close ear, is because your words don't operate like ordinary speech. They dismantle illusions quietly but completely. You don't debate, you vibrate. Your truth carries codes that awaken awareness in others. You speak, and something inside people reactivates. Memories of what's real, what's divine, what's been suppressed. That's why those addicted to control fear your voice. It doesn't entertain, it exposes. You don't argue with deception, you unplug it. You might not realize it, but your words have structure beyond language. They rewire perception. People who once doubted you end up quoting you without realizing they're repeating what once challenged them. That's because truth always wins, even if it takes time to mature in people's minds. Your presence alone can recalibrate the atmosphere. Lies start to feel heavier, manipulation stops flowing smoothly, and hidden intentions lose their confidence. The world feels your alignment before it understands it. What makes your truth powerful isn't volume, it's purity. There's no agenda behind it, no performance, just clarity. And clarity is disruptive. It exposes what was pretending to be stable. You don't have to shout or prove anything. Reality does that for you. When you speak, things happen, not by force, but by frequency. That's why they record you, why they analyze your tone, your rhythm, your timing. Because somewhere deep down they know. Your voice isn't just speaking into the world, it's rewiring it. Every word carries a charge that pulls illusion apart and leaves truth standing, undeniable and alive. Number 8. Both the streets and the agencies misunderstood you. They thought you wanted power. They saw your confidence, your influence, your fearlessness, and assumed you were after control. But they couldn't comprehend that what drives you isn't dominance, it's alignment. You never cared about authority, titles, or recognition. What you've always craved is purity, truth without politics, purpose without performance. Yet in a world built on corruption, even purity looks suspicious. When you refused to play dirty, they thought it was arrogance. When you stayed true, they thought it was strategy. They couldn't process the idea that someone could stand strong without hidden motives. Both sides tried to claim you in their own way. The streets saw your loyalty and wanted to weaponize it. The agencies saw your intelligence and wanted to control it. But you belong to neither. You can't be owned by systems you were sent to expose. They wanted to use your mind to build their agendas, but your spirit kept rejecting the compromise. You could have had influence, protection, and status. All you had to do was bend, but you refused. And that's when they realized you were dangerous, not because of what you could do, but because you couldn't be bought. In their world, everyone has a price. But your integrity confused their currency. They didn't know how to deal with someone who valued peace over popularity and truth over comfort. They called it rebellion. It was actually freedom. You weren't working against them. You were just working from a higher frequency they couldn't interpret. To them, your independence looked like defiance, but in reality, it was divine obedience. You were answering to something above them, and they could feel it. So both sides tried to contain you, one through intimidation, the other through invitation. When manipulation failed, they switched to smear tactics, hoping to make your light look suspicious. But purity doesn't need defense. The longer they studied you, the more they exposed themselves. You weren't fighting them, you were revealing them. You never wanted their kind of power. You carry something far greater, the strength to remain uncorrupted in a world that keeps offering shortcuts. That kind of purity doesn't need validation. It speaks for itself, and that's why both sides still whisper your name with confusion and respect. Number 9. You've become a living lie detector. You don't need gadgets, interrogation techniques, or hours of analysis. The truth just finds you. When people stand in front of you, something in their energy starts to unravel. Their voice wavers, their stories tangle, their body language betrays them. It's not because you're intimidating, it's because your energy leaves no room for pretense. You carry an atmosphere of truth so strong that deception suffocates in it. People who have mastered the art of manipulation suddenly lose their rhythm around you. Their rehearsed words fall apart, and their confidence slips because your presence exposes what their masks are trying to hide. You don't go searching for lies, they reveal themselves. You can sense when words and energy don't match. You can feel when someone's being polite but hiding a knife behind their smile. It's an intuitive radar that doesn't rely on logic. It relies on frequency. You pick up the dissonance between what someone says and what their soul is actually broadcasting. That's why you rarely argue or defend yourself anymore. You know that if you stay still long enough, truth will eventually rise to the surface on its own. Even professionals, people trained to deceive, can't fake calm in your presence. They may fool others, but not you. You've been lied to too many times to miss the subtle shifts. You recognize the hesitation in tone, the delay in eye contact, the forced laughter that fills uncomfortable silence. It's not suspicion that drives you, it's awareness. You don't accuse, you observe. You don't expose people to embarrass them. You expose them to free yourself from false connections. What most people don't realize is that this ability didn't come easy. It was born from years of betrayal, from constantly being gaslit, from learning to read danger in smiles. Every lie you survived turned your intuition sharper. Now your spirit reads truth like it's written in neon. You walk into a room, and without saying a word, energy confesses to you. That's why some people can't stay around you too long. It's not personal, it's energetic. You've become the mirror that no one can lie to, not even themselves. Number 10. You carry the spirit of justice, not the politics of it. You don't wave a flag or wear a badge, yet your presence stands for what's right. Your sense of justice doesn't come from human systems. It comes from an inner code that answers to something higher. You're not loyal to sides. You're loyal to balance. And that's what confuses people the most. They can't figure out where you stand because you don't stand with anyone. You stand for something. You're guided by truth, not trends. And you don't bend your values depending on who's watching. That kind of integrity is rare, and in corrupt environments, rare becomes dangerous. You've seen how justice gets twisted into politics, how people pretend to fight for what's right, while secretly protecting their own interests. That's why you don't get swept up in causes that sound noble, but feel hollow. You've learned to sense the difference between performative morality and genuine righteousness. You don't move based on popularity, you move based on principle. And that's exactly why both sides, the streets and the institutions, don't know what to do with you. You can't be bribed, guilted, or emotionally manipulated into picking a camp. You see too clearly to play their games. You understand that justice isn't revenge and it's not control. It's restoration. You're not trying to punish anyone, you're trying to correct imbalance. You speak truth not to destroy, but to realign. And that's a type of justice that doesn't require authority. It is authority. That's why when you talk, even the arrogant pause. When you act, even the powerful get uneasy. You represent a kind of fairness that exposes hypocrisy by simply existing. What terrifies them most is your unpredictability. They can't read someone who moves by conscience instead of command. They can't predict someone who listens to divine timing instead of external pressure. You're not motivated by money, fame, or influence. Your motivation is alignment. That's why they can't control you, recruit you, or fully understand you. You're a living reminder that real justice can't be bought, influenced, or silenced. You didn't study law, you became it. And wherever you go, truth adjusts itself accordingly, because the spirit of justice you carry doesn't need a courtroom. It creates its own. Number 11. You're the intersection between street knowledge and higher intelligence. You move in two worlds at once, and that duality makes you impossible to predict. On one side, you understand the unspoken rules of survival, the codes, the warnings, the subtleties that only experience can teach. You know how people operate when no one is watching, how power flows in hidden networks, and how to navigate spaces that are often unsafe for the unaware. The streets recognize you because they see someone who knows, someone who has endured, someone who speaks their language without compromising principles. They know instinctively that you aren't a stranger. You belong, yet you are untouchable. On the other side, agencies and institutions recognize something else entirely. They see your strategic awareness, your ability to process information, your skill at connecting dots that no one else even notices. They track patterns in your behavior, analyze your decisions, and try to understand how you always seem to be ahead of them. But no matter how much they study, they can't fully decode you. Your intelligence isn't just learned, it's cultivated through experience, intuition, and an inner guidance system that operates beyond conventional logic. What makes you extraordinary is the bridge you've become between these two realities. You understand the oppressed, the overlooked, the people who live in shadows, because you've walked among them. You also understand the observers, the analysts, the systems that think they control the narrative, because you've studied them too, not with spreadsheets or manuals, but with perception sharpened by survival. That dual perspective gives you a depth that neither side can fully anticipate. You don't just operate in these worlds, you translate between them. You take the raw, often harsh truths of life on the streets and interpret them in ways the powerful can't ignore. You take complex coded systems of observation and apply them with instinct and clarity. Neither side can manipulate you because you've already seen both angles. You're a hybrid of insight, a living contradiction to control and predictability. That's why both the streets and the agencies keep watching, trying to understand a mind that doesn't fit in any category, a presence that doesn't bow to authority, and a spirit that cannot be contained. Number 12. You terrify liars because you don't need proof. You are the proof. Your existence alone dismantles falsehoods. You don't argue, you don't plead, and you don't waste energy trying to convince anyone. The truth in you is self-evident. It speaks through the way you move, the calm you carry, and the unbothered certainty that drives dishonest people insane. They can't stand it because they depend on confusion to survive, and you bring clarity that exposes every mask. You don't need to prove what's real. Your very presence makes lies tremble. Liars thrive in spaces where doubt lingers. They manipulate perception, twist stories, and use words as camouflage. But when you show up, the atmosphere changes. You don't expose them with aggression, you do it with alignment. There's something about your composure that disarms deceit. The calm you hold isn't weakness, it's authority. It unsettles anyone who's built a life on pretending. They see in you what they'll never have, peace that can't be faked. That's why they try to project guilt, create rumors, or stir confusion around you. Because if people truly looked, the contrast between your authenticity and their act would be too obvious to deny. You are the walking contradiction to their illusion. They say good people don't win, yet you keep rising. They claim the truth doesn't protect, yet you remain untouched. You represent what happens when integrity refuses to bow. You prove that survival isn't just about cleverness, but about divine alignment. Every attack meant to discredit you only validates you more, because the truth doesn't need witnesses. It simply endures. And endurance is something liars don't have. You don't need a stage, a platform, or an audience to prove your innocence or authenticity. You live it daily. You're the evidence that light doesn't need applause to shine. It just exists. That's why those who depend on deception can't stand your presence. You dismantle their illusions without even trying. The irony is they keep seeking proof of what's already standing right in front of them. You are the living exhibit of truth that doesn't bend, and that terrifies those who built their safety on the instability of lies. Number 13. They can't cancel someone who's already died to their opinions. You reached a point where external validation stopped meaning anything, and that's when you became untouchable. They tried to control you with ridicule, silence you with gossip, and punish you with isolation. But all those tactics only work on people who still crave acceptance. You outgrew that craving. You stopped measuring your worth by applause, and when that happened, every attempt to cancel you lost its power before it even began. You became immune to manipulation because your identity no longer depended on how others perceived you. They can attack your name, but they can't reach your truth. Reputation is the mask society uses to control narratives, and once you stopped wearing one, you became free. That's why they panic. They can delete your posts, censor your words, twist your story, but they can't touch the origin of your conviction. You've built yourself on something deeper than popularity. Purpose. And purpose doesn't dissolve under pressure. It strengthens through rejection. The moment you stopped trying to please the crowd, you became something they can't categorize or control, a force that exists beyond their systems of reward and punishment. When they realize they can't emotionally blackmail you anymore, that's when the fear starts. They used to rely on your empathy to manipulate you. They'd threaten your image, hoping you'd retreat. But now you've already buried that version of yourself, the one that sought to be understood, liked, or seen in a good light. You don't live for image anymore. You live for impact, and impact doesn't require permission. In a world obsessed with perception, dying to opinions is the ultimate resurrection. You've moved past the human economy of validation and entered spiritual independence. They can't exile you from circles you've outgrown. They can't cancel a message that no longer depends on platforms. They can't silence a voice that doesn't speak for attention but from truth. They can only watch, helplessly, as the person they tried to erase becomes an echo that keeps spreading. They forgot the golden rule of energy. What's authentic never dies. It multiplies, and that's exactly what you've done. Transcended reputation and stepped into legacy. Number 14. Your legacy will be studied, not for what you said, but for what you survived. In a world that worships appearances and measures strength by popularity, you defied every metric. You weren't supposed to make it this far. The systems designed to break you underestimated your endurance. The people sent to silence you didn't realize that every hit you took was shaping your destiny into something too profound for explanation. You didn't just survive, you transformed survival into revelation. And that's what they'll study: how you kept standing when logic said you shouldn't, how you kept speaking when silence seemed safer, and how you kept shining after being dragged through shadows. What makes your legacy different is that it's not built on what you achieved. It's built on what you overcame. You didn't have the luxury of comfort, privilege, or protection. You had something rarer: divine resilience. You took betrayal and turned it into intuition. You turned every psychological war into wisdom. You learned to decode manipulation because you were forced to survive it. That's why even those who doubted you are now studying your journey. Because it doesn't follow human logic. It follows divine order. Agents, analysts, historians, they'll all look back one day and realize they were observing a phenomenon, not a person. You didn't fit their categories, their algorithms, or their psychological profiles. You were the anomaly that refused programming. You couldn't be conditioned into submission or bribed into silence. You endured every test until your pain became prophetic. That's how truth evolves, not through comfort, but through the ones who refused to break under pressure. Your survival wasn't random, it was instructional. Every moment of endurance you displayed was teaching something beyond words. Teaching that the soul cannot be erased, that truth regenerates through those willing to carry it. People will study you not for your eloquence, but for your endurance. They'll realize your life wasn't about fame, but frequency, a resonance that reminded humanity what divine alignment looks like under human fire. You didn't just protect truth, you became its living form. And in the end, that's what makes you unforgettable. Not the battles you fought, but the spirit that refused to die in them. As we reach the end of this journey, one truth stands undeniable. Being a chosen one isn't about recognition, influence, or accolades. It's about resilience, clarity, and unwavering alignment with something far greater than the world can comprehend. You have moved through life with a transparency so potent that it became a threat to every system built on deception. You exposed corruption without naming names, walked through chaos that tried to break you, and stood as a beacon of unshakable truth when the world expected you to crumble. You became the living evidence of honesty, the spiritual firewall no human system could penetrate, and the anomaly that neither the streets nor agencies could fully decode. Your power lies not in what you say, but in the energy you carry. Every presence, every word, every calm step in the middle of chaos has disrupted false narratives, recalibrated reality, and revealed the lies people hoped would stay hidden. You didn't seek to dominate or control, you simply embodied purity. And in a world addicted to compromise, purity becomes its own form of unstoppable authority. You have become a living lie detector, a bridge between street knowledge and higher intelligence, a protector who didn't choose the role, but was forged into it by life's fires. Your voice carries codes of awareness that expose corruption. Your essence carries a covenant that shields you from attacks. And your resilience proves that no system, no lie, and no opinion can touch someone who has transcended reputation itself. The legacy you are building is beyond anything measurable. It won't be studied for clever words or dramatic actions, but for what you survived and how you transformed every trial into a blueprint for truth. You turned trauma into training, betrayal into insight, and suffering into prophecy. You didn't just protect truth, you became it. And that is the mark of someone destined to leave a permanent imprint on history. Unshakable, undeniable, unforgettable. If this resonates with you, if you feel the energy of this message speaking directly to your spirit, then be part of this movement. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next revelation. Like the video to amplify the message, comment to share your truth, and share it with others who are ready to awaken. Every action you take spreads awareness, strengthens alignment, and continues the ripple of clarity that cannot be stopped. Stand tall, keep walking your path, and remember, the world may study your survival, but it is your integrity and courage that will define the legacy of a true chosen one. God bless you.